Hey tens, Ellipsis here. Today we're going to learn about how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide negative numbers. Some terms to know. A negative number is a real number that's less than 0. And yes, there are real numbers that are less than 0. In order to visualize negative numbers, I have this number line here. And here I have labeled all positive numbers, which would mean numbers above 0, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, and even numbers in between, like 1.5 would be here, and so on. But what do negative numbers look like? After all, the number line is a line. It extends in both directions. If there were no negative numbers, then it would be a ray, because 0 would be the point, and then it would go on forever in one direction, to the right. But it's not a number ray, it's a number line. So what do negative numbers look like? Well, negative numbers look something like this. -1, -2, -3, -4, and so on, in this fashion. And yes, they do look like normal numbers, except with this dash in front of them, which symbolizes that they're negative. And if you've noticed that here -1 is greater than -2, whereas on the positive side 1 is less than 2, and you're wondering why that is, it's because the number line is like a mirror. So the positive numbers go one way, and then at 0 they reflect and go the other way, with just the dash in front of them, making them negative. So that's the basics of what negative numbers are. And negative numbers are all real numbers less than 0. So the smaller the number is without the dash, the larger it is when there's a dash added to it. So if this is 1/2, then -1/2 is going to be right here. It's a mirror image. So let's move on to the next slide. How do we add negative numbers? Well, to add negative numbers, we follow the rules. So a negative number plus a negative number is equal to a smaller negative number. A negative number plus a larger positive number is equal to a smaller positive. A negative plus a smaller positive is equal to a larger negative. And a negative plus an equal positive is equal to 0. But what do I mean by smaller, larger, equal? What does that mean? Well, let's create some examples to match each of these situations. So for negative plus a negative, an example could be -5 plus, in parentheses, -7. So both of these are negative numbers and we're adding them. And this will result in a negative that is smaller than either of these two. So that's what the smaller negative means. Let's take the second one. A negative plus a larger positive is equal to a smaller positive. An example of this would be -6 plus 7. Well, any positive number is larger than a negative number, so what do I mean by the larger here? What I mean is when you ignore the negative sign, if the negative number is larger than the positive number, then it would result in this. But if the negative number is smaller than the larger positive number, it would end up in a smaller positive than 7. So the result of this will be a smaller positive than 7, but definitely larger than -6, or the negative part. If we have a negative plus a smaller positive, an example would be -12 plus 5. If we ignore the negative sign, then 12 is greater than 5. So this will equal a negative number, but that negative number is going to be larger than negative 12. And this one, a negative plus an equal positive is equal to 0. An example of this would be negative 14 plus 14. Well, if we ignore the negative sign, 14 and 14 are equal to each other. They're not larger or smaller than each other. So this will equal 0 because these cancel out. But why would these cancel out? Well, adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive. So what this is in fact 14 minus 14, which is also equal to 0. Alright, let's try some examples. Yes, I have 4 examples this time instead of 2, and one is for each situation that we will encounter. So let's take the first one, negative 4 plus 5. And before I show you the solutions to each of these problems, I encourage you to pause the video and attempt them on your own. Alright, I'm assuming that you're done and now you're waiting for me. So let's take the first one, negative 4 plus 5. Now this is an example of a negative plus a larger positive. So this will result in a positive number, but that positive number will be smaller than 5. So that's what we want to be on the lookout for. And to make this easier, we can switch these around using the commutative property and make this 5 plus negative 4. And remember, adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. So this is the same thing as 5 minus 4, or 1. So 1 is our answer. And if you don't get this logic, you can always use a number line until you get this. So let me draw a number line. And if negative 4 is here on the number line, and we want to go 5 to the right, then we would be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what is 5 to the right? Well, let's go to the right and label the number line. This was negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1. So negative 4 plus 5 is equal to 1. Yet another way you could figure out the answer is by adding them or subtracting them and seeing which one is reasonable. So according to the rule, a negative plus a larger positive, when ignoring the negative sign, is equal to a positive number that's less than the larger positive. And in this case, it's 5. So we want a positive number that's less than 5. And what you can do is you can add these two, ignoring the negative sign, or subtract these two. One of them is going to give you your answer. So if I did 5 plus 4, that would equal 9. And 9 is greater than 5, so that can't be our answer. After that, the only solution is to subtract. And then we get 1. Now if you're asking why not do the negative first and subtract the positive from the negative? Well, I have no answer for that, but it's better that you don't follow this method because it may be unreliable. But it's just what I've noticed so far. So let's try the second one, 3 plus negative 9. So using the same thing we did here, we can convert this into 3 minus 9, but we haven't seen this before. What do we do? Well, if we use the same method that we used here, we're going to get 3 plus 9, and that's 12. And that doesn't do us any good because a negative plus a smaller positive is going to equal a larger negative, and 12 is not a negative number. So what are we supposed to do? In this case, we have to subtract the smaller positive from the negative number, ignoring the negative sign. So 9 minus 3 is equal to 6, and since we're supposed to have a negative number, that is going to equal negative 6. Again, this is pretty unreliable, so I wouldn't recommend using that method. And if you're not sure about something, I would always recommend to use a number line and figure out your answer that way. So let's take this one. Negative 6 plus negative 7. Now we're adding two negatives, and we know that that will result in a smaller negative number. And this one is easier than these two, because now we're not having to worry about any positive numbers or something like that. So all we do here is we ignore the negative signs, add them together to get 13, and just add the negative in front to get negative 13. And that's our answer. Now, if you don't believe me, you can always go ahead and do the number line to double check this answer. And let's do this one now. 13 plus negative 13. Again, we can do the same thing we did here, and this will give us 13 minus 13 to give us 0. But you can also see that when you ignore the negative sign, these two are the same number, so these two will cancel out and give us 0. Alright, let's move on to the next slide. How do we subtract negative numbers? We follow the rules for subtracting negative numbers again, and this time a negative minus a smaller negative is equal to a larger negative. Negative minus a larger negative is equal to a positive. A positive minus a negative number is equal to a larger positive. And a negative minus an equal negative is equal to 0. So this time it's the opposite. But let's do some examples for these situations anyway. So a negative minus a smaller negative is equal to a larger negative. An example of this situation would be negative 4 minus negative 2, where we would get a larger negative that's larger than either of these two. And let's do this one. A negative minus a larger negative is equal to a positive. An example of this would be negative 2 minus negative 9. Now, technically this negative is a smaller negative than negative 2, but if you ignore the negative signs, and that's what I'm going off on, then 9 is greater than 2, so this is going to equal a positive number. And for this one, a positive minus a negative is equal to a larger positive. An example for this would be 14 minus negative 5, which is going to be greater than 14. Now, if you're wondering how this is, remember that when we added a negative, it was the same as subtracting a positive, but this time subtracting a negative is equal to adding a positive. It's opposites, because these negatives cancel out. It's like English. When you have a double negative in a sentence, let's take an example. I'm not doing this. The two nots would cancel out in English, right? And this would be the same thing as I am doing this. It's the same thing with math. When we have a positive number and we're subtracting a negative from that number, then these two negative signs are just like two knots in one sentence. So these would join together to make a plus sign. And it's also like using the dashes of the negative signs to create one, because a plus sign is obviously made of two dashes, right? But I didn't get to this last one. A negative minus an equal negative is equal to 0. Once again, an example would be something like 17 minus, or sorry, negative 17 minus negative 17, and that would equal to 0, because once again, these two will become a positive sign or cancel out, and that will cancel out these two, which is equal to 0. So let's try some examples. And once again, we have 4. So I encourage you to pause this video and try all of them out. Alright, I'm assuming that you've tried some of them. So let's do this first one. Negative 13 minus negative 4. This is an example of a negative number minus a smaller negative, or a larger negative, I should say, but when you're ignoring the two negative signs, once again, 4 is less than 13. So this is going to result in a larger negative. So we join the two negative signs together, or the minus sign and the negative sign. You can see that they're the same thing, they look the same, so they are the same thing. So this is the same thing as negative 13 plus 4. And if we reverse this, this is going to be 4 plus negative 13, which is the same as 4 minus 13, and that's problematic. So a number line is most helpful in this case, but I'm going to show you a way that will not use a number line just to save you time. But if you don't get it, a number line is perfectly fine when you're getting introduced to it, and you can go ahead and use that instead. So what I do when I encounter such problems is I subtract 4 from 13, ignoring the negative sign. So 13 minus 4 is equal to 9. But why should I do that? Well, since negative numbers are a mirror image of the positive numbers on the number line, we have to do the opposite thing to get the answer. So instead of 4 minus 13, we have to do 13 minus 4 to get the answer, and then turn that answer into a negative number. So this is equal to negative 9. And again, if you don't believe me, check it on the number line. So let's try the second one. Negative 2 minus negative 7. Now if we ignore the negative signs again, 7 is greater than 2, so we're going to end up with a positive. And when we do this, we make it negative 2 plus 7 because the negatives cancel out. And we can reverse this to get 7 plus negative 2. Since adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive, this is the same thing as 7 minus 2, which is equal to 5. Let's try this one. 6 minus negative 15. Now, a positive number is interacting with this, so when we subtract a negative number from a positive number, the result is going to be greater than 6. So this is in fact 6 plus 15 because the negatives cancel out, and 6 plus 15 is equal to 21. So let's do this one. Negative 14 minus negative 14. And again, when we're subtracting the same negative number from the negative number, and they cancel out to give us 0, because negative 14 plus 14 is the same thing as 14 minus 14. So this is our answer. Alright, let's move on. How do we multiply negative numbers? We follow the rules again, but this time there are less rules. So a negative times a negative is equal to a positive, and a negative times a positive, or a positive times a negative is equal to a negative. So what this is, again, when we have the same sign, the two negative signs cancel out to give us a positive number. And when we have different signs, whether it is negative times positive or positive times negative, we are going to get a negative number. So this one is easier than adding and subtracting negative numbers. So let's try some examples. Let's take the first one. Negative 4 times 2. Now, since they have different signs, we know for sure that they're going to have a negative sign in front of them, because it's going to be a negative number. So all we do is we ignore the sign and multiply across to get 8. And since they have different signs, we already have the negative sign there, so negative 8 is our answer. Easy, right? Now, before I show you the next one, I encourage you to pause this video and try it out. Alright, I'm assuming that you've tried it, so let's do this one. Negative 2 times negative 5. Now, we know that these two negatives will cancel out because they have the same sign, so this is literally the same thing as the positive equivalent, which is 2 times 5, or 10. So that is really easy. Alright, let's move on to dividing negative numbers. So how do we do this? Same rules as multiplication. If they have the same sign, which is negative, it's a positive number as a result. If they don't have the same sign, it's negative. Simple and easy. So let's do the examples. Let's do the first one. Negative 4 divided by 2. And again, I encourage you to pause this video and try them out on your own. Alright, I'm assuming that you're done, so let's try this one. Negative 4 divided by 2. Again, we ignore the negative sign, just divide straight across to get 2, and then we add the negative in front of it because they have different signs. So that's our answer. And this one is the same. 27 divided by negative 9. They both have different signs, so this is going to be negative again. And 27 divided by 9 is equal to 3. So that's negative 3. Boom! We have finished. So, thanks for watching. If you liked this video or this helped you, click that like button. If this didn't help you, click that dislike button. I greatly appreciate feedback. If you want more updates on new videos, click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. If you have any questions related to this topic, please put those in the comments below. And remember, the comment section is the equivalent of a class discussion, so if you have any answers to any of the questions, you can answer them. If you have any suggestions as to how I can improve my future videos, or even on what I should do next, please put those in the comments below as well. If I like your suggestion, I'll be sure to include that in the next video and give you a shout out. See you in the next one!